I'm Bob and I like to make stuff. Today we're gonna make a mute switch. This whole thing was made out of scraps. I had some scrap aluminum and a scrap of hardwood. I cut 2 strips of it down to 4.5 inches long, about 2 inches wide, and then drew a line right down the middle of each piece. Using a bandsaw, I cut these right in half just along the line. And you could also do this on a table saw with a fence. I lined up all 4 pieces and just squared off the ends with a miter saw. Then I set up a stop block on my crosscut sled and cut 2 pieces longer for the front and the back, and then 2 shorter pieces for the sides. I wanted this thing to be pretty strong because it's going to be a pedal and you're going to step on it. So I put my dado blade on my table saw and cut box joints on the whole thing. I use this Incra jig and it's really handy, but you could also make a jig pretty simply. Anytime you do box joints or finger joints, you want to do a lot of test pieces to make sure that you get these fit correctly. I did do a lot of tests before I cut these final pieces. But once I got the jig dialed in, I cut the 2 end pieces to match and then the 2 side pieces to match with opposing fingers so that they would lock together. I just added glue down in between all the fingers and fit it together. I actually didn't have to clamp this one because the fingers were tight enough to hold it in place. On the sander, I just smoothed out all the faces, shortened those extra fingers that were hanging off to get the whole thing square and smooth. On one end of the box, I used a straight edge to draw a diagonal line from the top corner. Then I tilted the table on the bandsaw to match that angle and used the fence to cut off the corner of the box. I traced the outline of the top and the bottom of the box on some scrap aluminum and then just cut out that shape with the bandsaw. I left these a little bit oversized so that I could sand them down later to be flush. I lined up the pieces, but this time I traced the inside of the box onto the aluminum and then used a punch to mark 4 corners that I could drill out. I did this on the top and the bottom pieces and then drilled a hole through each corner. I couldn't find my countersink bit, so I used a 1/2 inch bit to do a small countersink on each one of these holes. Then I fit the panels in place and marked where the holes were with my ice pick. I drove in the first set of screws by hand and I should have drilled them out, so on the second side, I pre-drilled the holes before screwing them in. They went in a lot easier and I wasn't worried about splitting the wood. Then I had a closed box, so I took it to the belt sander, flattened out all the edges, got all the aluminum flush with the wood, and then started rounding over the edges to make everything smooth. I used a sanding block to smooth out all the finish on both materials. I removed the top panel and found the center point on it. I used a punch to mark that place and then drilled a 1/2 inch hole that would fit my stomp switch. Then I just did a test fit to make sure that I had the hole the right size. On the back of the box, I placed my input and my output to figure out where I wanted them to be and then trace their outline. I also marked the center point, and from that center point, I drew a line and found exactly the center of the area that needed to be drilled out. For the first one I used a Forstner bit, and it actually was not a great idea. It had a hard time getting through, so for the second one I used a spade bit, and it worked much better. I test fit the audio jacks and then marked on both of them where the screws needed to go before pre-drilling those. These will get screwed in later. Then it was time to wire everything up, and this is really easy. These are XLR jacks and they have 3 terminals. I soldered on a wire to each one of the terminals on each jack. I put the plugs in place inside the box and then connected the red wire from one to the other. That connects terminal 1 to terminal 1. I soldered together the wires for terminal 2, then the ones for terminal 3, and right now it just acts as a pass-through. I screwed the plugs into the back of the box and then soldered on a stomp switch. One terminal goes to the black wires, one goes to the green. Now this is a momentary switch, so it's only in effect when you actually have the button pressed down, and when you do, it shorts these 2 wires out and cuts out the audio. I mounted the switch in the top panel and then screwed it onto the box, and that was it. I really like the way this thing looks, so now it's time to test it out with a microphone. You can see when I press it, the input just drops off completely and comes right back. There's no click or pop when you press it or when you release it. Alright, so it's a really simple project, but you may be asking, why in the world did you make this? Well, it's for our podcast. Anytime you're recording audio, sometimes you might need to cough or clear your throat or something like that, and rather than moving the mouse on screen to find the on-screen mute button, it's easier just to have a pedal. So now I can just step on this, cough, clear my throat, whatever I need to do, let off of it, and it comes right back. Obviously, a very simple project. Electronically, there's not much to it, but what's actually happening when you press down the button, you're shorting out the signal that's running between these two. A lot of times when you're making audio projects and you put any sort of a switch in there, you get a pop or a click when you press that switch. And in this case, that doesn't happen because it's shorting that out. This is made specifically for a phantom powered microphone. microphone, so the microphone requires like 48 volts of power to work correctly, and that's the reason that this type of simple circuit works. If you were using a different type of mic that wasn't phantom powered, the circuit on the inside with the switch would have to be a little bit different, but still very simple. A lot of people are probably going to ask if this would work for a USB microphone, and no, it will not. You would have to build an entirely different type of circuit, and it would use different plugs. It would probably be simplest at that point to just go buy a simple hardware mute switch for USB. But if you wanted to, you could totally make it, it's just not this thing. And once again, I want to thank Casper for sponsoring this video. They've been sponsoring me for a while, and I'm really glad about that because I really enjoy the mattresses that they make. I sleep on one myself, I have for quite a while, and so do my kids. They're a combination of memory and latex foam, and they squish these mattresses down into a box and ship them to you, so you don't have to go to a mattress store. And then when you open the box, they just kind of inflate and turn into a full mattress. They're super comfortable, they're a good price, and they come right to your door. You get to sleep on it for 100 nights, and if you don't like it for any reason, they'll come get it. Now that's a pretty good deal. So you get to try it out a long term and see how it affects your sleep, which is pretty great. If you want to check out Casper, go to casper.com/make. Use the code MAKE when you check out and you get $50 off your first purchase. So thanks again, Casper. Be sure to go check them out. I hope you liked this project, and if you did, I'd love to hear about it. You can let me know in the comments down below or at ILikeToMakeStuff.com. That's my website. I've got lots of articles and plans and shirts and all sorts of stuff there for you to check out. If you want to see what I'm working on in between these videos, follow me on Instagram or Twitter or Facebook. I post there pretty often. I try to stay pretty active and talk to people. And if you want to show me some of the stuff that you're working on, I'd love to see it. Just tag me on one of those networks. I've got some playlists here of lots of other different types of projects that you might be interested in, so be sure to check those out because I have a lot of different types of stuff. That's it for this one, guys. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.